Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're going to have a full review and discussion of this very cool zero tolerance knife, new for 2018. This is the 0393. Now this may actually be my favorite zero tolerance to date, and there's a very particular reason for that. I like zero tolerance because of the way they make these sort of overbuilt heavy duty folders, very useful, very high end. They check a lot of boxes for me, no question. But sometimes they get things a little out of balance. And this knife, I think they've really gotten a well-balanced knife. All right. Of course, its predecessors, the 0392, was a great knife. That was the factory custom. And I loved that knife as well. Now, I will say because of that, because of my experience with the 0392, I kind of, anticipated this being pretty well done. All right. The reason I was kind of so stoked about this at the beginning, and I talked about that in a video a while back when we first were introduced to what knives zero tolerance would be doing. I said, this is going to be a great knife. This is one I really want to check out. And that's because I knew the 0392 was great. I won't go into a full discussion of that here, but I will link Dr. Frunke's discussion of that knife and my review as well down in the description box. So look for those if you want sort of a fuller examination of the 0392, which is a great knife. This knife, of course, based on it, but does make some changes. And actually, I like the changes. In fact, I like the changes maybe even better than the way the original did things. So that's what makes this such a spectacular knife as far as I'm concerned. And so hopefully I'll be able to kind of tease out some of those ideas as we work our way through this review. It will be a little longer review because of that, but I think this knife is worth it because I think zero tolerance has done something pretty stinking cool here, guys. So let's go ahead and carry on. Oh, by the way, it would be wrong of me not to mention by way of introduction that this is based on the Hinderer Eclipse. Okay, so it's a Hinderer collab ZT. All right. Now, let's go ahead and finally get to size and weight on this guy. This is 8 5/16 overall, so just a hair over 8 1/4 inches. The blade length here is 3 5/8, and that's measured from here. So notice I'm kind of ignoring that little hook that wraps up around the stop pin there. The handle length, also measured to here, by the way, is 4 3/4. And that little wave here adds about like 3/32 or so. The thickness on this guy is just over 1/2 inch. Okay, so you're dealing with 9/32 in this dimension. And the weight here, guys, is 5.02 ounces. So you may as well say 5.2 ounce. I mean, 5 ounces. Does this knife carry well in pocket? Yes, it absolutely does. 5 ounces is absolutely fine. And for a knife of this size with these materials and that thickness on the blade stock, 5 ounces is very good. Now, I guess at 5 ounces, if you're wearing like really lightweight linen pants or something, that could pose a problem. But otherwise, I think you're going to be just fine. All right, so let's move on now that we've kind of covered all of those introductory things and start talking a little bit about this blade. There's a lot to like about this blade. There are a couple things that are going to be potential challenges, but I think they've done a pretty good job of balancing this out. And you guys have heard me talk about that before. I really like when a blade is able to strike a good balance between usefulness and durability, especially in a folder, because in a folder, you want that extra little bit of heft to do some things that maybe you weren't anticipating that day, but now you've got to do something that's going to be potentially a little hard on your knife, and you don't want to be worried about breaking or bending or rolling that blade. Okay, so 20 CV steel here, very tough, very corrosion resistant, great steel overall, very similar in performance to M390, which we all know is the darling child of the knife world right now, and for good reason. Okay, it's a great steel, and so 20 CV is equally as great pretty well. I love the way that they've done the grind here. So it's kind of a compound grind. Essentially all they've done here is change the angle, guys. It's not like hollow ground back here and flat up here or anything super special. And so primarily that is going to be an aesthetic difference. Okay, it just makes the blade look a little more interesting, but I think they've done a great job. Even if it's just aesthetics, this blade is a very attractive blade. You got some nice DLC on the flats here. You've got this harpoon swedge with the sort of Spanto style grind. Really nice visually. And it works. It cuts stuff, which is, of course, is primarily what we want. And so let me go into just a little bit of detail on how this cuts, okay, before we move on. The blade stock here is pretty thick, 156 thousandths. It's only, though, 27 thousandths behind the edge, which is pretty thin. In fact, that's the exact same measurement you'll get if you measure a para 2. Now, of course, let me bring this in for a second. We're not to comparison yet, but the big difference here is going to be that this full flat grind in the thinner stock, the stock is only 10 thousandths thinner, but so this is 146 thousandths, this is 156 thousandths. But because of the full flat grind, okay, the wedge effect, that is how steep of an angle I've got to push through my material, is going to be considerably more on the ZT. Now that does make for a thicker, heavier duty, more robust blade, which is why Zero Tolerance made that choice. And I think it's a fine choice because frankly, in day-to-day cutting tasks, it cuts well. All right, the only time you're gonna notice a problem is if you go to cut some apples up, right? You're gonna get halfway through the apple and it's gonna split it open like a splitting maul, right? That's about the biggest limitation here. But to be honest, guys, I rarely use my EDC knife for food prep. Right? If I'm making food, I almost always have a kitchen knife around that is, of course, designed for that and is very thin, therefore. And so to me, you know, how well a knife slices apples is really not the end all and be all test. Yes, it tells you something about the grind, no question, but that's not the determining factor for me whether or not a blade is any good. And so I think this blade is absolutely fantastic. I think they've really done a great job striking a balance between cutting power and durability. And so yeah, the blade here is a real win as far as I'm concerned. And I do like, and here's where, you know, they've made a departure from the 0392. There have been a few different 0392s, but I actually like this blade the best. I think it's the most visually interesting while still being very versatile in terms of its usefulness and in what you can do with it. Moving on now to the action. We have here a titanium frame lock, and basically I'm going to call this, you know, titanium scales with an overlay. All right, that's how I'm kind of thinking of this rather than, you know, titanium liners and this being the scale. I'm going to say, you know, we've got titanium scales and a G10 overlay here. You can see there's the lock bar, there's the relief cut. There is a stainless steel lock insert here. We don't need an over travel stop because the G10 does that job. All right, it is on bearings. They're the typical ZT plastic caged bearings that you're used to, but they are very smooth. The detent is pretty nice, okay? The 0392, I don't know, if you've got one, comment on this. It's gonna be close to this. I think the detent on the 0392 might be just a little stiffer. All right, in fact, this one, if you watch, hopefully I can do this on camera. It doesn't always work. Yeah, there you go, look at that. I can from time to time, now I'll tell you, it doesn't always work, but I can from time to time use the thumb studs or use the blade stop there, the stop pin, as a thumb stud and deploy the knife that way. It doesn't work all the time, guys. It really doesn't. So, you know, if I'm being totally honest, most of the time I'm okay doing it, but from time to time I'll try and just be completely unable to do it. The flipper, however, works all the time. The only issue I have with this action, it's very good, you know, typical of ZT action. However, the flipper tab is kind of angled up, and the part, you basically have to push your finger on the point of the tab, which seems kind of like the opposite of what you'd want. It is based on hinder, and of course we know XM18s, they do that. You've got that big flipper tab that's aimed directly up so that it's not very comfortable. If you look at something like the Curtis F3, they've specifically put a nice flat jimped spot exactly where your finger should touch, which is really how a flipper tab should be designed. For some reason, that's really hard to figure out though. So that's about my only complaint. Otherwise, total win. I absolutely find the action to be superb here. You know, you can sit on the couch and flip it while you're watching a movie and be totally comfortable. Definitely a fan of the action. How about though the handle construction? Well, guess what, guys? There's a couple complaints I have, but overall, I think this is actually better than the 0392. And the reason I think it's better is because of the way it feels in hand. The grippiness that comes from the G10, it's the slightly more hand-filling or hand contouring profile of it. is just fantastic to me. They've really, really done a great job of making a very comfortable, very useful handle. Now, the addition of the G10, you know, some people who just like those titanium frame locks are going to be like, why did they do that? And who knows? Certainly, you know, some design elements are coming in here, and, you know, they probably lightened up the knife a bit. And I feel like it does make the knife feel a little nicer in hand for sure. Now, we do have a couple of things here that I don't love originally. Now, you can probably see this clip is not original to the knife. This is a Hinderer clip that I ordered from Hinderer's website. You can get them at a lot of places. DLT Trading, Warriors and Wonders in Canada has aftermarket Hinderer. Well, they're Hinderer parts, but they're sort of upgrades to your knife. And so since I've gotten into this, let's talk about this just a little bit. The way this knife is done, you've got your overlays, you've got your scales, and then standoffs in here, pocket clip and lock bar insert over here. Or I mean, pocket clip insert or space holder over here, and then the pivot screw. So in terms of hardware, I think, okay, I'm not 100% sure, but I think the tab, the backspacer or the spacers here, and obviously the clip are going to be replaceable. The only downside to that is I wish then you could get a pivot screw to match. Okay, it'd be nice to kind of be able to have them all consistent, but I don't know that that's going to be possible. The other thing that they hinted at when they were talking about this at SHOT Show, I guess, is the idea that you may be able to change out these scales, and that would be pretty cool as well. Especially would be awesome to put carbon fiber scales on here. I think it would look really, really good, along with some blue hardware to match my clip. I am going to make some changes to this knife, and I'll make an update video when I finally get to the point of, number one, deciding what I want to do, and then actually ordering stuff and switching it out. Now, in terms of comfort in hand, it's excellent. In terms of construction, I think it's really, really nice. You know, you've got that nice open construction. And so, yeah, the handle I think is just great. I'm absolutely happy with this. And even the fact that it's a little bit different from the 0392, I think that's a nice change. Not only because those who already have a 0392 wouldn't want just basically a cheaper version. Now there's my knife, just a regular production knife, which would suck. So I think they needed to make a change. Two, I do think this puts this more in the realm of a production knife. And by the way, the price point on this guy, I think is $220, which is really nice for all the stuff you're getting here. The texture on here is not the same exactly as a Hinderer. Maybe it is. It's just maybe oriented differently. So if I put, so there's the texture on my XM18. There's the texture here. You can see they are very, very similar. So it's at the very least, let's say it's a Hinderer inspired texture that we've got going on here. All right, let's move on to some comparisons. The one probably closest comparison to this would be the 0562. And apart from this, and this is where, guys, I'm gonna talk a little bit about one of the reasons I like this knife so much in terms of what's in ZT's lineup. The size, the weight, the utility are all just really, really dialed in. The only knife that I think comes close to this in that sort of category where it's just a great size for everybody, it's a great blade shape for everybody and for just about everything, the 0562 would be the next closest. The 0560 would be similar as well, only it's going to be bigger, okay? But it still cuts reasonably well, very comfortable in hand, probably a little more comfortable even than this. The 0560 is probably my favorite ZT. But this is right up there, guys. And in terms of recommendations, if you emailed me and said, which ZT should I buy? I would absolutely recommend this over just about anything. Because I'll be honest, my preferences are a little larger, right? So the 0560 is probably not going to be for everybody, where this coming in at a little smaller size, being a little nicer to carry, I think is more sort of versatile. All right, let's go ahead now finally and talk about the actual comparisons that I do have. Some of these are going to help to make the point that I've been making. So it's very close in size to the Para 2. Of course, you're getting more cutting edge. It's going to be a little more hefty, a little more robust on the blade, but right in that really, really sweet spot in terms of size. There it is next to the XM18, another Hinderer, of course. All right, and of course, very close, very similar construction, or I mean, very similar sort of design language, if you will, that comes from Hinderer. This is the fatty, so it's going to be exceptionally like oversized. This would probably be more similar to, you know, if they do an XM18 in the slim like they've done the XM24. What do we got here? Here is an Inkosi. And again, you know, these knives are very, very similar, guys. They don't look similar, but they really are. You have a knife that is about 5 ounces and that is really well balanced out to be a user. Okay, so you've got a blade shape that's a nice combination of being strong and heavy duty while also cutting well. You've got a comfortable handle that's not too big to carry in pocket. All right. Of course, there's no flipper, no bearings on this. And this is going to be, you know, considerably tightly toleranced and probably a little more long lasting if you really came down to it, but very, very close. I do have one knife that I'm going to save for the end, so let me throw in a couple of other things on the way. Of course, budget titanium frame lock. Kaisers are a great example of that. This is the Quicksilver. I really like this. Now, it's not going to be as, what would you say, as broadly appealing, I would say, as this knife. I think this could work for just about anybody doing just about anything. This is not so, right? There's a little more, what would you say? There's a little more style here. It's a little more aggressive looking. All right. Let's throw in a couple of big knives just to show that, you know, these are the knives that I really like. This is my Curtis F3. And to really get the size comparison cranking, let's grab the Cold Steel 4MAX, which won't even fit in the frame. And you can see, again, is a much larger knife. If you really need a knife that's just meant to take a beating and keep going, this is going to be it. This is a little, you know, less robust, if you will, but certainly much, much more practical. Now, the closest knife I feel like that I have in my collection to this knife is absolutely the Riot Knives Torrent, which is one of my favorite knives. It is so well done, guys. It truly is, you know, it's everything that a really high-end knife should be. It's got really great details. It's well put together. The action is smooth. The detent is dialed in, like on and on and on. This knife gets so many things right. And this is very close to it. Look, the blade shape is very similar. The blade length is very similar. In fact, I think what I'm going to do is a full comparison between these knives. Even the steel, guys, M390 and 20CV, you know, there's a lot of really, really close similarities to this. The Torrent is absolutely a fantastic knife. And the fact that this CT is comparable to it and even gets close to it for, you know, half the price or maybe 2/3 of the price or something is pretty spectacular. So those are my comparisons, and I hope through those comparisons you've started to see why I like this knife as much as I do. This is a really well-balanced knife all around. You know, it's not too big to carry. The edge geometry is good. It cuts pretty well while still being very robust and very tough. So really great combination of just toughness and usability, great ergonomics, great styling. They've really, you know, checked a lot of boxes here. I guess the one thing I will say that I didn't like, the clip had to go as far as I was concerned. It was just this painted black clip that I thought took away from the knife. So I've replaced it this way. There are tons of aftermarket clips out there that'll fit an XM18 and they'll all fit this knife as well. So even that really isn't something I can take a lot of points away for. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.